excited. However, when the seller mentions that he bought it off of someone for a mere $25, that's when the trouble would begin. They eventually, however, agreed on $3,000. Then, once Rick did get the revolver appraised, his trusty expert actually valued the gun at about $5,000 in the current condition, slightly putting Rick into the black. But many pistols have many different models, and some have been manufactured in a smaller amount of quantities, some only in the low hundreds even. And for one, the original Colt 45 Peacemaker began its production in 1873 and was auctioned off at $242,000 in 1987. Now, adjusted for inflation, that's over $525,000 in this year. And the most expensive gun that was ever sold in the US was for over $1 million. So it just goes to show there's big money to have one of these guns. As for the Colt 45s made during the same time period as this one, depending on its condition, it can sell for anywhere from $2,000 to $50,000. So Rick has a lot of room to go up. Number 5. $20,000 photogravures. Easily one of the biggest profits that the shop ever earned from a sale, and it just had to happen before the Pawn Stars even became a thing. Occurring about 20 years or so, a woman had walked into the shop with several pieces of photogravure done by Edward Curtis, a famous American photographer. Now, for those not really familiar with this type of thing, it's an early process where photographers would use a copper plate that would be coated with a gelatin tissue, followed by an etching process to produce print copies. Now, it really makes you realize how fortunate you are to have your iPhone. Anyways, Rick would take a gamble and offered the lady $50, which is what she was actually asking. Then, upon doing some more research, he eventually sold them as a set for $20,000. $50 to $20,000. Wow.
I'm just looking at the letter C and seeing if it is consistent with the rest of the coin.
Number 4. Gold coins. Jewelry, gold bars, chains, and coins are what make up for most of a pawn shop's business, and because it's more of a trade-off than an actual business, there are states which withhold laws to protect sellers and also buyers. These laws permit what can be bought, sold, or tampered with in the case of a pawn or a sale. Now, this time it just so happened to work in favor of the gold-silver pawn shop, as the laws are different in each state. Now, sometime in 2014, the shop would take in a pile of gold coins that were worth approximately $12,400. However, the law in Nevada doesn't force a shop to wait the regulated 30 to 90 days before tampering with the items. So, they did their regular routine and melted them down into a collection. Now, we're assuming that the owner of the collection was planning on taking the coins back, as he'd filed a lawsuit against Rick and the pawn shop. Sadly, however, Rick knew the law was on his side, and no further action was able to be taken.
I have a script of The Godfather.
Okay.
It came with a picture of The Godfather and an autograph inside, signed by Al.
Number 3. The Godfather. Okay, so technically this isn't a rip-off since the seller Diane didn't part with the item, but considering how little that Rick was willing to hand her compared to what she later received in an auction, Rick must have purposely given her a bad offer.
$500.
500, not 1,000, huh?
No, I mean, the thing is...
With Diane bringing in an original screenplay of The Godfather, signed by Al Pacino himself, Rick brought in his handwriting expert to authenticate the signature. And yes, it was actually very real.
This is Al Pacino's signature.
Wow, that's great.
All right, so what's Al Pacino's signature worth on a script?
Well, I'd say, a high retail would be a couple $1,000s.
But even though the expert said that it was worth even a few grand, Rick would offer her just $500, with the bottom line being that he'd only get maybe $1,000 out of it. With that, she just simply walked out. And at least now, she knows that it's the real deal. Which came in handy when the signed piece of work would later be auctioned off for a well-deserved $12,000. It gets better though, we said that it was signed by Al, but it actually wasn't Al Pacino. It was actually Al Ruddy, one of the producers of the film. So you might want to get yourself a new handwriting expert, Rick.
So this is my 1962 Lincoln Continental.
Where'd you get it?
I got it from New Jersey.
Number 2, a 1962 Lincoln Continental. In the 5th episode of the series, Seller Devin brought in a very clean-looking 1962 Lincoln Continental. The engine had been worked on, the body was in great shape, but that interior needed some serious work if it was going to be sold. So assuming that Devin wanted 13 or 14 grand for the beauty, which is maybe how much he had put into partially restoring it, agreeing on $9,500 can feel like a loss, though it's better than nothing. Typically, though, vintage cars are going to go up in value and not undersell for what they were worth brand new. $10,000, by the way. The interior would receive about 15 grand worth of work to bring it to showroom shape, so it's almost 25,000 already dropped on the piece. By the end, though, they were left with a car valued at around 35 grand, and with the right buyer, it could reach up to even 70 grand, believe it or not. So even though the seller couldn't shove out an extra 15K, he didn't achieve its full value, which is unfortunate, and was left with an assumed $4,000 to $5,000 loss.
It was printed in 1484, one of the oldest printed books.
Just what we need, Rick, another old book.
Number 1, a book of Isaac Newton's. Historical mathematician Sir Isaac Newton was a great man, revolutionary in the scientific community to say the least, and he loved to read. A book of his could be considered priceless by many, maybe a historical artifact. So what else is there but to have one enter into the gold and silver pawn shop with one? The seller didn't have any kind of papers with it, but despite its restored cover, the old man's book expert did call it out to be a real piece of Sir Newton's collection. However, considering the Godfather mishap, who really knows what to think? If it was real, that $20,000 valuation that the book expert would offer is meaningless, and the mere $7,000 that the old man coughed up for the item was a total ripoff. And that concludes what are 10 times that the Pawn Stars scammed the seller. Feel free to let us know in the comments below what you thought about today's video, and leave a great comment, because one person who leaves a really awesome one is going to have the chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. So be sure to make your comment great. Also be sure to subscribe for more like this in the future, and have yourselves an excellent day.
Ten things you didn't know about Chum Lee. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Screeny. The Gold and Silver Pawn Shop is pretty much a family business, but after years and years of hanging out around the Harrisons, Chum Lee became a part of the family. Despite his obvious lack of expertise and tendency to mess things up, his bestie Big Hoss and his dad Rick are still keeping him around. In addition to being a comic relief of the series, he's also a fan favorite, and Pawn Star viewers can't get enough of his epic fails. This popular reality show told us almost everything we need to know about Chum, but there's still a few things he's managed to keep hidden. Let's take a look at 10 things you didn't know about Chum Lee. Before we reveal some of his best hidden secrets, make sure to subscribe to our channel to find out more about your favorite TV stars. Number 10. Rick wants him fired.
You know you're not allowed to play with it.
First off, that is no longer your sword. I sold it.
Chum Lee has millions of fans around the world, but Rick Harrison isn't one of them. Chum's reckless behavior rubs him the wrong way, and it's the root of the animosity between the two men who've never really seen eye to eye. It doesn't take a genius to realize Chum Lee didn't get his job because he's an expert. He's a childhood buddy of Rick's son Corey, and their long-standing friendship is the reason why Chum started working at the store. He was usually behind the counter at the beginning, but once the Harrisons started developing the show, they asked him to join them in front of the camera. If he was working anywhere else, Chum Lee would have been fired by now, but the popularity of Pawn Stars made that practically impossible. He's a reason why fans still